start recording right now. What's up, Kyle? How are you doing?
Excellent. How are you?
Pretty good.
Nice. Nice. Man, that's a bummer. Well, you answered my question. I was going to ask, where was the last training at? I was looking for it, but.
Oh, I know. Sorry. It was recording, and then when I crashed, and
yeah,
Elias saved me by playing that video, and then when I got back on, it didn't record. But
damn technology.
We'll do them again. It's good because I'll be getting a little bit better as they go on. So
yeah,
I don't want evidence of my first few rough ones with the technical
what did you guys
difficulties.
cover on that last session?
What's that?
What did you guys cover on the last session?
So we covered working with buyers today's the second part. So I kind of started it from the beginning of the process and just, talking about generating leads at kind of overview, just basically generating leads, turning those leads into prospects, turning those prospects into clients, and then just kind of building off of that relationship. And so we're, from then on out, we're going to go, once you have a client, you start showing them properties and eventually write an offer. So that's what we're going to get to today is we're going to go through kind of the basics of setting up tours and some best practices for setting up tours and touring properties, and then talking about strategizing offers and how to handle that with your client. And
sweet. Do you go into a little bit of like a follow-up system at all?
Yeah, a little bit. There's a lot to cram into, an hour and a half. So
yeah,
we'll definitely be doing more of those, but we're talking about, using stuff like Real Scout to stay on top of it. This is more like, since we're kind of progressing through, this is more like, okay, once you've converted a buyer and you have a client, what do you do from here? So we won't really cover like following up with clients that you're still kind of working on converting, but we'll talk about staying in touch with clients that you've got.
Sweet. Sounds like a plan.
People are trickling in here.
What up, everybody?
How's it going?
Good. I'm in the car right now.
Nice.
Harrison, I know that you had a fun day of wakeboarding, but call me after training. I left you a message yesterday.
Oh, okay. Was that you? I couldn't tell.
That was me.
All right.
That was me.
Definitely. I'll give you a call.
Okay, cool. Is that Kyle?
Yes, sir, it is. Uh-oh, he just lagged out.
Big dog, how you doing?
Excellent, man. How about yourself?
Wonderful, bro. Wonderful.
Perfect.
Oh, I finally figured it out, how to have the screen sharing. What do you guys see on the screen right now? It just has like the title page, right?
Yeah.
Agent success track.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. We'll just give it a couple more minutes, see who else shows up. Up to 18, that's cool. What's up, Peter? What's up, Sang? What's up, Omar? What's up, Joey?
Hey, what's going on? Good morning.
Hey, good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Morning.
Will and Bella and Angela and Martha and Joaquin and Laura.
Morning, everyone.
It's good to see the house filling up. How you doing, Jonathan?
Oh, not too bad. Just hanging in there. Just seeing how we're gonna talk about these buyers.
I like that you come to the training, man, because you've been doing this longer than myself, for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I had to give up this fancy library background to try to mitigate the technical difficulties I've been having. So it's not as cool. Am I like dark or is that just my screen? Let's see if I can make
I
this.
think you're
Yeah,
just
John,
Filipino.
I was
You're just
wondering,
Filipino.
why is your screen looks so dark.
I know, dude. I'm trying to.
What's up, team?
Hello.
So I saw the comment about ring lights. So we're actually ordering ring lights for the team to help you guys step up your video game.
Yeah, my ring light is. It's funny when I was asking for recommendations for Zoom setups, they're like, ring lights are sweet. They make you feel super basic, but yeah, I don't know. Got hat hair too, so I'm just gonna wear a hat. Thing is like blinding me, but it doesn't look that bright. The light in the library is way better. All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. We got about 21 people here. Thank you everyone for coming. We're just gonna kind of pick up where we left off last week. Just to kind of recap, last week we're going through working with buyers and kind of the progression of lead to prospect to client to writing offers to escrow to closing and past clients. So last time we finished right about when we were talking about setting up setting your client up on listing notifications. So I just kind of want to back it up to that point and pick up where we left off. Let's see. So I have one of the last slides from last time, buyer presentation. So, you know, we talked a lot about buyer presentations and how they fit in and you know, the importance of really just the importance of the buyer presentation, definitely in terms of getting your client all that information and establishing yourself as an expert. But we also talked about, you know, depending on the different types of leads, that getting the appointment is the most important thing. So if a client wants to see, or if a prospect wants to see a property, don't get caught up too much in the buyer's presentation, but do try to circle back and set some time aside to go through all of this. You'll find the best way that works for you as far as conveying all of the information, whether you do it, you know, in a sit down Zoom session where you full on do the presentation, or whether you kind of do it in phases throughout the process. But, you know, the main thing is that you establish yourself as an expert and you kind of walk them through what's ahead so they know that they're in good hands and that, you know, as questions come up, that you're already kind of one step ahead of them and that you know that, you know, the main concerns of a buyer. So the buyer's presentation is a great time to really just do kind of overarching introduction to the whole process. But again, just don't get caught up too much in the mechanics of it. Building rapport and solidifying a relationship is more important than anything else at this point in the process. And then, you know, once you've kind of locked them in as someone that plans on working with you, then you can really start making sure that you're sending them and giving them and explaining all the information that they're going to need in the process, but don't let that get in the way of establishing a relationship. So Elias is a great resource when it comes to the buyer's consultation presentation. And, you know, like we talked about last week, being able to do that presentation is just a good foundation to have. You won't always do it. I haven't done a full-blown presentation in a long time, but it's a skill you need to have because there are going to be those people that really want to talk through the entire process before they're even comfortable kind of making a decision and going out and looking at home. So as a new agent and as an established agent, refining it, but as a new agent, really making sure you're comfortable explaining the process at a high level from start to finish is crucial. So wanted to kind of pick up where we left off there. But once you've got them as a client and you're moving on to the next steps in the process, then it becomes more about the search itself. So I made this slide. I pulled this from the roadmap page of the buyer's presentation. And we're going to kind of go through and use the roadmap page, but go through it in more detail because, you know, that's the page when you're explaining to your client, you're going to take them through that process. So I wanted to take you all through that process and dive into more detail from an agent perspective, because if you're going to be explaining this process to clients, then, you know, it's important that you understand every step of the way too. And I think it's just a good progression. So you'll see this page in the buyer consultation, but it goes from finding your new home and the steps along the way to the escrow and the closing process. So that's kind of what we're going to cover today. We ended last time talking about setting up listing alerts, and we were running a little bit short on time. So I want to make sure that I give that, you know, the attention that it deserves, because setting up listing alerts and establishing the communication and the rhythm with communicating with your clients, once you kind of move past that dating phase and you really are in the thick of the home search, the way you set up listing alerts is going to be pretty important. So Real Scout, obviously, I push that more than anything else when it comes to this. And, you know, I think it's kind of a no-brainer as far as the tool that you should use it for a number of reasons. The information is great. It's really easy to use, but just kind of the whole interface, the fact that there's an app, like some clients aren't going to want to do anything if it doesn't have an app. So just sending them email alerts from the MLS, like these days, really isn't going to cut it with a lot of people. Most people have been searching for homes on Zillow or Redfin or some other app since before they started talking to you. So they're already used to a quality user interface and different alerts. So I highly recommend investing in Real Scout. There's, you know, I showed you a lot of shortcuts last time and how you can set up searches based on neighborhoods and schools. And then you can monitor the client's activity in it, which it goes a long way with working with clients that are already established, but also provides good kind of prospecting or kind of nurturing opportunities, because you might have people in there where you set them up and you started talking about showing homes, but nothing really came up, or they needed to wait on some other factors or something like that before they really started looking. And with Real Scout, you can see when they're actively been opening your emails and looking at homes or setting up searches themselves and looking. So it kind of prompts you as a good time to reach out and follow up and check in. So, you know, the nurturing part of this business is super important. You can't just focus on the leads that you're actively working, because you don't want anyone to fall through the cracks. So Real Scout covers a lot of the bases when it comes to the home search part of the process. So, you know,
So John, I wanted to build on that really quick.
Yeah, go for it.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
So last week we just wrote on a property in Berkeley listed right around 800,000. I originally set this lady up who is 72 years old on Real Scout. And every time she got an email from us, she said, I think that you guys really understand what my criteria is in a home. And I appreciate you guys really looking out for my best interest. Now I'm ready to go and see homes. And so all we did is set her exact parameters in Real Scout and was on top of it and looking at what she was seeing and viewing. And, you know, we're close to getting her in contract. So only speaking from experience, if you guys are going to invest in your business, Real Scout, I think, should be a must-have.
Yeah, definitely. I think Real Scout is a must-have, or something similar, but Real Scout is one of the best. I mean, there's free resources that you get through the MLS, but Real Scout's just so much more robust in the features that it has and the user interface and everything. It's, you know, the standard what clients are used to. And like, to sound like an old timer, when I started, not even that long ago, like 6 years ago, we didn't have anything that good. I mean, and it's crazy to see how much it's progressed, but you know, we had MLS notifications. Like Redfin had just spent a ton of money so you could start drawing lots. So you could set up searches by drawing lines and rather than just cities and basic criteria. So, I mean, to think that how quickly it's evolved, you know, you're benefiting from that technology, because it's funny. Back in my day, we couldn't draw lines around neighborhoods and only Redfin could do that. And I would like, not that this is a good idea, but have clients like use Redfin to search properties and just tell them to set me up on it when they send me the notifications they did. And now you have tools like Real Scout that are just so much more robust. So take advantage of that. There's so many reasons that it pays off. So last thing on listing notifications, and we talked about last time, kind of starting with a wide net and not just focusing in on exactly what the clients say. We talked about how clients don't necessarily know exactly what they want. So they might think that they're set on, you know, a 4-bedroom, 2-bath with in a certain location. But until they really start searching, they're not going to be able to kind of weigh their different priorities when it comes to the home search. So to obviously tell them that you're going to, you know, explain to them that it's a process, and that when it comes to monitoring the market for what they want, you're going to make their criteria just a little bit wider than what you discussed, just to make sure you don't miss anything. Like if a client says, you know, you got a client looking for a townhouse and they absolutely don't want a carport, and you exclude listings that don't have a garage, you might miss an absolutely perfect house or unit for them just because it doesn't have one little feature. So obviously explain to them, hey, I know that, you know, you said you didn't want a carport, but this has the vaulted ceilings and it's a corner unit and it has everything else you want. So I wanted you to at least check it out. And then if they, you know, let them tell you, no, 100% this feature is a deal breaker or not, but don't restrict their searches so much in the beginning that you might potentially miss out on something. And same goes for size. Like if someone tells you minimum 1,500 square feet, pad your searches a little bit when it comes to things like square footage or lot size, because if someone tells you minimum 1,500 square feet, if a 1,435 square foot home that met every other criteria pops up for them, but you have it on minimum 1,500 square feet, you're going to miss that. And if you miss, you're sending them listing notifications and they have access to information too. And, you know, you're sending them properties, but you didn't send them this one that's perfect for everything because you really dialed in their criteria way too tight. It's not a good look. So, you know, explain to them in the beginning that you're going to start with wider criteria, and then based on what they're getting, you can make adjustments and, you know, kind of check in with them as the process goes on about the alerts and how they're feeling about the stuff they're seeing. And if it kind of jives with what they're looking for, and make adjustments. But, you know, really I advocate starting with a wider net and narrowing down as the process goes on, because it's an opportunity to kind of educate the buyers on what else might be out there. I told my story last week about how I absolutely would not consider San Leandro, but after I bought a house, I kind of wish I considered San Leandro and listened to the realtor a little bit. So as you get more comfortable too, kind of nudging your client along, you get more comfortable in your role as the expert, you're going to be able to be confident when it comes to getting them to consider other things. Because really it's a series. Buying a house is a, you know, there's going to be compromises unless money's no object. There's going to be some kind of compromise. So if you only have your listing alerts set up for their ideal scenario, it's probably going to be a little bit too narrow. So keep it wide, allow them to see the options that are out there, and then allow them to kind of decide what compromises they're willing to make. And, you know, they'll, as they see more, then they'll decide, and you'll learn along with them what are the deal breakers and what are the things they're kind of flexible on. Because you go through the needs and the features in the consultation, and you definitely note all of those. But even from the beginning in the consultation, say, hey, like if we find something that has 8 or 9 of the 10 must-haves, that's pretty dang good, and it's going to be really tough to find everything. So just making sure they understand that they should have a feel for what's really important and what might be willing to give is just going to make their search easy. Because if they're dead set on a specific property, it just might be tough to find. I was talking to Peter yesterday about some people he was talking to, and they had, you know, fairly unrealistic expectations for what they wanted as far as location and the property itself. And, you know, at that point, you're not just going to tell them like you have champagne taste on a beer budget, but you can show them with what's out there, what the search is really going to be like if they're not willing to make some compromise. And eventually they'll figure out, like, if the size of the house and the level of updates is what's really important, they might have to compromise on location. And if location is the most important, then they might have to compromise on the house itself and some of the features it has. So getting them to understand from the consultation and throughout the home search that you're going to try to find them exactly what they want, and you're going to try to get them in their dream home, but it's a process and it'll evolve, and, you know, making compromises along the way is probably going to be part of it. So just wanted to kind of put a cap on setting up listing alerts and, you know, the importance of the flexibility on the buyer's side. Anyone have anything to add on that as far as, you know, tailoring listing alerts to clients' needs? Okay. All right. So you've got them set up. Jonathan, did you want to say something?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say I too, just like you said, I like to like if they say, oh yeah, our budget is 700,000. Just like you said, because of experience, you're echoing all of my thoughts. As far as, even though they say 700, sometimes I would go maybe 850, just because we're still in that range. Because like you said, there might be something that's lingering, you know, out there, or it's been sitting on the market that we can maybe get a deal on. You know, maybe it's been sitting at 8 or 750 or something, and maybe we can get it close to 700.
Yeah.
You know how long it's
Yeah.
been on-
So really with anything that's a number in a range, they're going to give you the range, and then there's the range that you're going to put in the listing alert. So for, you know, bed and bath count, usually like if they you can go by square footage rather than size, because you know, if they need a 3-bedroom, then a 2-bedroom might be too small, but a big 2-bedroom. But you can also set up listing alerts that for clients. So one thing I forgot to mention is, I think it's a good best practice for all the listing alerts you set up for your active clients to make it so you get a copy too. So you can, obviously you're not going to look at every single one, but if you're seeing when properties are coming up for that client, that'll prompt you if you want to check in, or if a lot of stuff is coming in. And another thing you can do if you don't want to, you know, deviate too far from the listing alerts that you're setting up for clients, is you can set up another alert that's similar to what you set up for the client, but with even looser criteria. So if something comes up that is outside of what they're talking about, but checks a lot of the other boxes, you can send that to them separately. Because you really want them to feel, like you're monitoring the market and the activity on their behalf. And that's something that I always tell my clients, you know, when we first kind of get going, is I tell them, I'm always looking for properties on your behalf. In addition to MLS, there's multiple networks of different channels that we can hear about listings. And so it's important for me to have a really good feel for what you're looking for, because I can keep an eye out for it and maybe find something that you don't. And also establishing with clients, like, okay, like some people might want you to send them every single listing, but like I said, most people have been searching before. So at least establishing like, okay, I'm just gonna, you know, we're set up on the alerts. I know you've been looking. I'm gonna assume that you're seeing what's out there, and leave it up to you to tell me if there's something that you're further interested in. But if I see something that, you know, I know you checked out, but I think is a great fit for you, and you don't send it to me, I might send it your way just to make sure you didn't miss it or something like that. Like, just establish with them how they want to communicate as far as properties, because again, you want them to feel like you're consistently searching on their behalf. Like if you can make a client feel like all you're doing, they're your only client, and you're always kind of they're always on top of mind for you, it's just going to make it, you know, even more successful a relationship. Elias, do you want to say something?
No, I couldn't agree more. What you guys will all realize, and I think that people have been doing this for a while, you've seen your buyers are going to evolve, right? They come in and they immediately can see the short game, right? Oh, I love this home. That's my dream home. But as you start seeing more homes and potentially writing offers and maybe missing out, they start to evolve, meaning that they start to realize that, hey, it doesn't have to be a 10 out of 10. As long as it's 75% of my needs and 25% of my wants, over time, there's some cosmetic things that we could change, we can fix, we can do some work and put some sweat equity in. So what you'll find is that your buyers will start to evolve. So including things that might not be their top picks, or maybe a city over, or square footage, or maybe a bedroom count less, your buyers will start to evolve. And what you didn't think that they would love, automatic or all of a sudden they walk into a home, they're like, you know what, we can see the potential in this home, and we can see that we could possibly get a deal on this and beat out some of the competition. We want to move forward with this property. So you're going to see the evolution of your buyers. At first it's like, yes, I love this house, but then over time they start to get a little bit more realistic, because you're helping them and you're educating them and you're walking them through the process. So you know, keep an open mind and help them to keep an open mind.
Yeah, and those are the things that really make you, that's how you really establish yourself as a professional and an expert in this, because any agent can just, you know, follow their list of needs and wants and send them listings like that, and then just kind of facilitate the process. You want to do more than just facilitate the process. You want to facilitate the process, but you also want to inject as much of your perspective and expertise and skill and experience as you can, because that's why they're using an agent. And you know, in an area like that, we're lucky in an area like the Bay Area and the market that we're in, is that there's a lot of nuances to, you know, the homes themselves, because they're older, and there's a lot of variation from styles of homes and construction and different neighborhoods. And there's a lot of variation from areas that are 10 miles away. So if you can get them to consider things that they might not have thought, they're really going to appreciate your role as an expert in the process and just solidify the value. And those are the things that really help as far as a continued relationship down the road, and having them send you their friends, and separating yourself as just more than just someone that's facilitating their home search. So opportunity, always be looking for opportunities to add value, and just going exactly off of what they said isn't necessarily adding value. And it's harder as a new agent, I think, because you don't, it's a skill you have to work on to kind of not push back on what they want, but maybe nudge them in different directions based on what the criteria. Like if you have no reason to think that they, you know, don't maybe need as big of a lot that they are set on, then you don't need to bring it up. But, you know, if it's clear that they have certain expectations of a property that aren't necessarily necessary for their needs, and it's going to make their search harder, like nudge them in the direction of what you think is the best for them. Because there a lot of people are looking for that. Like they want you to be an expert. So they appreciate when you inject your perspective that comes from the experience. I mean, you help a lot of people, and when you're new, again, it's harder, but you help people find homes for a living. So you have a unique perspective sometimes when it comes to some of the stuff that they're going to encounter in their home search. So just always look for opportunities to add value. But, you know, that being said, we've got the listing alerts set up. You've got a good rhythm as far as getting properties, and you're getting ready to go tour some properties. So let's kind of skip over to that point. We have a lot to cover here, but establishing, you know, the rhythm as far as them monitoring the market is important. So once you're in a good spot with that, or, you know, it's always evolving, but they'll start sending you alerts. So whether it's, you know, Real Scout's super easy because they can just click that they're interested in properties. But, you know, you might, every best effort to set someone up on a system, and then they're just stuck on Redfins. They might just be sending you screenshots of properties they like, or forwarding it to you, or something like that. Just make sure you have a system for each client to track the properties that they're sending you. And, you know, as part of the consultation, and as things move along, establish how you're going to, you know, the rhythm for showing properties. Like you don't necessarily, depending on their search, you're not necessarily going to jump and go tour every property that comes up. But if they, you know, have narrow criteria and they need a specific neighborhood, and not a lot comes up, then yeah, when one comes up, you're probably going to go see it. But if they're early on in the search and they're still trying to decide if they're, you know, they have an $800,000 budget and they're trying to decide between San Leandro and Oakland and Castro Valley, like you're going to be looking at a lot more properties in the beginning. So establishing like, okay, you know, ask them as part of the consultation, like what's their schedule like, when's the best time to see properties, all that. And then once the properties start to pile up that they're interested in, then you can start setting up tours. So, you know, finding what the rhythm is going to be like for that specific client, whether it's you're going out multiple times a week and looking at a couple of properties here and there, or you're going out every Saturday afternoon because of their work schedule and just doing a marathon of showings. With some clients, it'll take looking at a lot of property to narrow things down. So just because you're showing someone 10 properties every Saturday in the beginning doesn't mean that it's always going to be like that, because it takes showing them, you know, 10 properties on a Saturday to narrow it down to what they really want. And then you're just, okay, that $800,000 buyer that was trying to decide between those three cities, now they're set on kind of this area of San Leandro. So their criteria gets a little bit tighter. So showing them properties get a little easier. And 10's a lot. Like, I mean, you know, agents on this team hustle and everyone's down to show 10 properties. But in my opinion, like I try to tell buyers like around 6 is usually good for a day, because at that point, like they all start to kind of blur together. You're not really getting much out of it because just the fatigue sets in from touring a bunch of properties. But if that's, if they're fired up to go see a ton of stuff and their schedule only allows them to go out once a week, like you're going to show them 10 properties on a Saturday. But again, it's going to evolve as the process goes on. So let's go. I'm going to go back to this sheet real quick. So we're talked about the initial consultation, financing, real quick, just because we kind of glossed over it. But as part of the initial consultation, it's important that you understand exactly where they're at with financing. It's going to be a natural part of the conversation because your price range is one of the key factors, and that's going to depend on the lender. So whether they're pre-approved or not, who they're pre-approved with, it's just important that before you really get out in earnest, that you've connected with their lender, understood kind of their financing situation, understood their price range, discussed it with the buyer, so you really know that the price range they're looking in is a payment that they can make and that they're comfortable with. And it's also important to connect to the lender because you might find out someone might have some unrealistic criteria, and the lender is a good resource for, do they have more room, or what have they said to you as far as going up or down in budget. So you got to look at the lender as your partner in this process. Like the lender, the buyer, and the agent are kind of a team in this whole thing. So establishing that relationship with the lender early on is important. And, I like to kind of check in every once in a while and let them know. And sometimes the lender can kind of help you nudge people. Like I've had clients that can go up another couple $100,000, but it takes them a while to, really swallow that. But having the lender check in as part of a conversation and emphasize that what that means as far as a monthly payment, and they've had the context of going out and seeing some properties and what maybe going in the next tier is going to look like, the lender can help you evolve their search to, get them more in the realm of something they want, and also be competitive when it comes to actually writing offers. So make sure you get involved with the lender early on. Everybody should have lender partners that they're confident in, people that, you get a random question, somebody that you're comfortable talking to and shooting a text. So if you don't have, for the new agents, I would say, like, kind of a piece of homework would be to if you don't have a couple of go-to lenders that you like communicating with and are helpful to you, that's something that you should kind of get under your belt as soon as possible, because they're going to be a good resource for you when it comes to working with clients and answering random questions about financing and obviously doing the deals when the time comes. So kind of jumped back to that, but we're at this home shopping part in the process. So now we're out touring properties. I'm going to come back to this slide in a little bit, but a little more information on home shopping. So we talked about streamlining communication with the buyers, having some kind of system that makes it as efficient as possible, establishing, when you're going to go look at properties, and from there, it's pretty much going out on your first tour. So we'll go through setting up appointments and everything in a little more detail in a moment. But I want to jump to this next part and just talk about when you get to that first tour, you whether they're a referral and there's someone you maybe have a lightweight relationship with or not, or whether they're an internet lead or a friend of a friend or whatever, that first tour for me is kind of a key milestone in the whole thing. Like, you've done a lot of work to get them up to that point to where you're out showing some property with them. So to me, that's the point to really just seal the deal. And just, if you don't already feel like they're locked in as your client, that first tour is crucial in advancing them to, your loyal client. So in caps, to put be prepared, organized, and professional. So it takes a lot of work to set up a buyer tour these days because everything's by appointment. And it's super important that, they don't know that it's you got to jump through all these hoops, because you got to figure out appointment windows and line these all up and try to do it as efficient as possible. And it doesn't really matter. So no matter how difficult it is to set up these tours, it's important that you come off as prepared and organized and professional. So whatever that means to you, as far as the basics in establishing that you're somebody that they want to work with. So for me, obviously, it's just the basic things as being professional in general, like be be put together. Like, obviously, like I dress pretty casual. A lot of people team dress pretty casual. If there's ever a time to be overdressed, it's when you meet a client for the first time. Like I like that I'm comfortable dressing casually, but I'd rather be overdressed than underdressed. And until I've met a client and, I know that I'm going to be cool just wearing Vans on a tour, like I'm going to, I don't wear dress shoes very often these days, but I wear dress shoes when I meet a client for the very first time because he'd rather be overdressed than underdressed. Like, everyone's going to have their own perspective on that, but you only get one chance to make a first impression. And, for better or worse, like how we look is a big part of how we're perceived. And I think even more so in this industry. So just take that to heart. Like it's, obviously we want you to be yourself and be comfortable, but you also need to establish yourself as a professional. So whatever that means to you, just keep that in mind. And then be organized. So, ahead of time, we'll talk about it when we talk about setting up tours, but they should know where you're going, what properties you're going to see, kind of a general timeline. I like to put together just a little folder with some, I print out information for each. And this stuff I don't necessarily do every single time, but when you can hand them a folder that has, like a buyer booklet and a map routing out, listing off the places you're going to go to and a little bit of information on each page. I'm still working on kind of my first time touring packet, but I like to have stuff like that in there. Like I want to have notepads and a little notepad in the folder they can take notes on. Like it might just be fluff, but those are the little things that can go a long way with people when you're showing them that how organized you are and that what you're going to do for them. So make a good first impression, and just make sure that you're on top of everything that's ahead. So make sure that you double check the confidential remarks for all the properties you're going to see. And that's something that you should kind of be proactively researching as they send you properties. So if you're planning on showing properties on a Saturday and they're sending you properties, like you don't necessarily need to schedule appointments and set up all the tours until you get closer to the actually going out. But when someone sends me a property, I always pull it up and take a quick look at the confidential remarks, because if there's an offer date of Thursday or whatever, if there's something you need to know, like you want to convey that to your client. Because one of the worst things, especially early on, is a client's fired up about a house that they see and you plan on going to see it on Saturday and they don't get a chance to see it because the offer date was Thursday and you didn't take the time to double check. So making it a habit to double check the info on any properties the clients are interested in. So if there's an offer date, then great, like you can be pretty safe. But if you're just getting started and they're sending you a property that's been on the market for 10 days and there's no offer date, check in with that listing agent. Let them know you plan on showing it. Check in with activity and convey that to your client. Like, hey, just so you know, there's a chance that it might not still be available, because it's a bummer if they don't get to see it, but it's far worse if they were expecting to see it and they don't get to see it. So just make sure that you're in the habit of checking that. And also when you're that's where you're going to see information like any special circumstances with access. So if you don't realize that there's some weird, not normal thing with getting the keys until you're standing in front of the property with the client, like that's a super bummer. And it's even worse if you run into a situation like that the very first time that you're with a client. So doing all these things and being, double and triple checking everything so you come off as a professional is super important. And once you've established yourself as a professional, like you can make little mistakes here and there. Obviously you don't want to, but if, you forgot to get the code so you can't open the lockbox, or you didn't realize that they're not going to be able to tour the amenities of the condo because you're there after a certain time, or you're a couple minutes late or whatever, like if you make a really good impression on your first tour and your first few tours, those little mistakes aren't going to necessarily hurt you because they understand that, stuff happens. But if your first tour is unorganized and chock full of mistakes and mishaps, like you might not get a second tour. So really just making sure that you're dialed in for that first tour is super important. And obviously the tours after that, but I can't stress enough how important the first impression is when it comes to meeting your clients for the first time and taking them through properties for the first time. Elias or anyone, you got anything to add on that? Good.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go for it.
Just for the newer agents. I would just have a habit of when we're showing property and we're opening up the lockbox, if you could just have like your jacket or something, just have a routine of as soon as you open the door, put your lockbox in your jacket pocket or something. Because one time I opened the door and showed the property, you you get caught up in whatever you're talking about with the client about the house or some of the amenities it might offer. I locked I put it down. I put my key down in the house and I locked it up and everything. And then she was like, okay, where are we going? We were in Oakland off of 98th near the Oakland Zoo. And then she was like, what house we going to next, Jonathan? And then I was looking for my lockbox key. It was in the house. I put it down.
No.
I don't know if that's ever happened to any of you guys, but I put the lockbox down, had to call the agent, the listing agent. Of course, I was done for the day with that client, right? But then I called the listing agent, asked her, could she somehow come to her listing and meet me there at some point during the day so I can retrieve my lockbox key that I left on the counter.
Oh, wow. That's
So
crazy.
you can get kind of caught up in that when we're talking with the client. So just have a routine. Be kind of mindful of as soon as you open the door, put your lockbox key in your pocket somewhere, in a jacket pocket.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that. My advice to everybody, and John and I will talk about this, this might be a lab item, is that we do a Cloud CMA buyer tour for every single client. It's the same pattern. It's the same rhythm. We put all of the links to all the addresses we're going to go to in the notes section. We also text that all the locations that we're going to see, the order in which we're going to go see them. And then I upload every single property that we're going to view in HomeSnap. So in an instant, if they have a question about the property square footage, I can instantly pull that up. And I also have LandGlide available. So if they ask where the property lines are, I run that same exact offense for every single tour. Even if we saw 8 homes yesterday, and they say, well, we want to see 8 more tomorrow, I load all of those in Cloud CMA. I send it to them. I send it to them in an invite in their notes section. I include all the pictures, all the photographs, all the buyer comments so they can leave notes. Everything is the same exact rhythm every single tour. And the clients start to see, wow, these people are consistent. They do the same thing over and over again, and we don't cut corners.
Yeah, totally. And so, and setting up tours is something that, because it's especially these days. I mean, and that's one thing that newer agents, you don't realize, but for those of us that have been doing it, for longer than 6 months, the coronavirus, like a lot of other things, made showing properties so much more difficult because everything is by appointment, or it should be by appointment. You have to get a form signed. Every listing agent's process for scheduling appointments is a little bit different. I mean, more and more people are using Calendly, which makes it easy. But even if everybody has Calendly, you're trying to set it up in an efficient way based on the route. But then the one smack dab in the middle doesn't have an appointment until late afternoon, and so you're rearranging the whole thing. So we're actually going to go through and do a lab, and I'm going to send out more information this afternoon. But we've talked about doing labs to kind of follow up with these lectures, and we're going to start doing labs. It's going to be Wednesday late afternoon, I think probably 5 o'clock, and I'm going to run that one, and then Fridays at 10 o'clock, and those are going to be a lot more kind of open format, and they're going to be on the more kind of detailed, labor intensive steps of this process. Because if I took you through everything that goes into setting up a home tour right now, in this hour and a half and the amount of time that we're trying to cover, it's not going to work. It's going to take an hour and a half to really teach somebody the best practices and the most efficient ways to set up a tour. So we'll send out the information later today on labs, but I think this week's labs will be centered on setting up buyer tours. And I like how Elias is talking about just the standard and you don't cut corners. Cloud CMA is a great way to do it, but whatever it is, just have a system. If you don't have a system right now, then learn a system from an established agent or an established team and adopt that as a best practice, and then tweak it so you have your own. But whatever it is, just find a system and routine for setting up tours and communicating those to your clients, and stick to it every time. Because if you just do the same thing every time, it'll make it easier for you. It'll make it consistent with the client, and it'll just streamline the whole thing. And I like what he pointed out about having the information for all the properties. I put that in here under be prepared, organized, and professional. Is detailed property information should be on hand. Like clients are going to expect you to know all kinds of random stuff about the property. So like, they might ask you what year it's built, or the square footage, or the lot size, or what kind of heating system it has, or what the siding is. Like, have that information on hand so you can answer it quickly. Like, have those all and loading them into the app so you're not searching it each time. Like, you might be up in the hills and you might not have service. Like, I'm old school. I print out for myself. I print out, and again, we'll go through this in the labs, but my process, and I've been doing this for a while, and I learned it from agents I used to work with, is I print out an agent report for every property. So if we're going to go see 6 properties, I have an agent report for all 6 properties. I highlight any notes on the confidential remarks. So if I need to point out that there's an offer date in a couple days, or if there's an alarm code, or if there's some weird thing I want to make sure to point out about the property, I have that highlighted. I stack those agent reports in the order that we're going to. I write the appointments at the top of it. And then I just, as I get out of the car, I grab the agent report on the top and I stick it in my pocket. So if they ask what the lot square footage is, or ask what year it's built, I have that just ready to go. So those little habits of touring homes that'll become second nature are super important to establish as a new agent, because they really set the tone for how smoothly this whole thing goes. So again, we'll really dig into setting up tours in a lab, because it's frankly, it's a lot of work these days, because doing it efficiently with all the new guidelines is a pain. So we'll go into detail on that.
It really, it is a pain. And I like what you said, John, like that first impression, like we only get one chance, right? So if you're fumbling for a CBS code that you need to put into the lockbox, it's an additional code that you have to have in order for the lockbox to open. If you're searching for that, if you're wrong on the times, if you don't know the square footage, if you're fumbling around for information, if you don't have the listing agent's contact information on hand, you lose credibility chips, right? When we first meet a client, it's all about our credibility chips and building stock and letting them know that we're a person of value. But if you're fumbling and you don't have a quick answer to their questions, square footage, how many bedrooms, what's the lot size, offers due, and all these things, you lose your credibility chips. And that's when it is most important. So I love that you said that, John. Like, that first impression, we don't get a second chance with these people. They're coming to us to help them with the largest investment of their life. We can't make small mistakes from the onset. We have to come out as people with value, come out with fire, come out with a consistent presentation every single time, and they'll appreciate that, and they'll value you guys. So I love that you said that, John.
Yeah, for sure. It's huge as far as locking them in. And it's those little details of being super organized and prepared and professional that they remember when it comes to referring you. Like, if you want every buyer to turn into a past client and a loyal advocate, and if you just do an okay job and there's some weird little things along the way, like, and a friend might buy a house, it might be like, yeah, we used so-and-so, and like, they were fine. But you want to be like, yeah, we use so-and-so, like, he was super on it. He knew you want them to be raving about all the little things that you did. And it's the attention to detail, in my mind, that really sets you apart. So, no details too small when it comes to every step of this whole thing.
Because imagine this, the client thinks, well, if this person can't get a buyer tour together, how are they going to be with putting my offer together and presenting the offer? Like, and John's going to get into that. That's a whole nother section, but it starts with you doing a solid buyer tour. Then once they want to write an offer, we negotiate, we run the comps, we have a strategy call. Then we put together very clean paperwork. This team is known for presenting clean paperwork, right? When they receive our offer, like, wow, your offer was clean, it was organized. I never come back to you and say, hey, you missed section A, line B, what's that? So we are known to do quality work and present quality paperwork. And it starts with your guys' buyer tour. And it's just a standard that you should have for your own business, whether you're repping Team Fast or not, it's just a standard that we have that I'm going to do quality work and I'm going to run an offense that is crisp every single time.
Yeah, and it's just routines and habits, and just drilling that in, and just setting a standard for yourself so you do it every time, and it'll just become standard to how you do these things, because you're going to be doing it over and over and over. So if you're just kind of winging it and piecing it together, versus you have systems and processes for how you schedule appointments, how you set up tours, how you discuss certain things, it just makes everything comes off much better, and it frankly just makes your life easier to just have standards for yourself and your business. So it's just really important as a new agent to just establish those habits and really understand the importance of a lot of the little things that can go a long way in, you know, being successful in taking clients through this process. Like I said, like chances are you're helping them buy the most expensive thing that they've ever bought in their life up to that point. And if you are messing up little details, or you can't quickly answer questions, or you don't know how to get certain information, like they might second guess the fact that they're trusting you with, you know, $500,000 or $1 million or $2 million. So every little thing, from how you present yourself to just how sharp you are when it comes to taking them through the process, is super important. So we'll go through a tours in the labs. We'll make sure that's recorded, because what I'm going to do is kind of step-by-step process of how I take, you know, the list of properties that clients sent me and translate that into a tour, and then execute that tour, you know, smoothly and efficiently, because really it is an art these days. And you know, the first couple months things started to get busy. I would be in such a bad mood if I had to set up a tour of, and I had a lot of clients that were looking at a lot of properties each time. And it's just, it is difficult, and you got to schedule appointments, and once you get better at it, it takes less time. But even as dialed as I could possibly be setting up tours, it still takes a lot longer than it did before all these requirements. So one quick note about that, we'll get into more detail later again, but PEDS, you'll hear that. PEDS is the Coronavirus Property Entry Advisory Disclosure. Basically, there's some new rules. One thing that's important to know off the bat is property tours are restricted to the agent and 2 buyers. So, you know, I had a client whose sister and dad and boyfriend came to most showings, and then once coronavirus started and the PEDS came into play and all the restrictions, I had to tell her, like, hey, you know, it's got to be your dad or your sister, or your boyfriend and your sister or your dad, because unfortunately it's only 2 people. And you know, these are requirements and Cal OSHA things. Like, they're not things that you want to really mess around with. Hopefully things will get looser as things get better, but you know, it's your license that you're messing with when you start messing with the rules. So as much of an inconvenience it might be, it's important to follow the standards that are set. And then the PED is a form that everybody entering the property needs to sign, basically stating that, you know, they haven't been exposed to coronavirus, they don't have it, they don't have a cough or a fever, and listing agents require that. And a lot of times you're going to find that listing agents will require it to make an appointment. Less and less people are doing that, because it made it really difficult, because you'd have to get the form signed back before you could even schedule the tour and all that. So usually now you just have to have it sent in before you show the property. But make sure your clients are aware of that, because you want to be able to get that signed promptly, because it's an important step in showing properties these days. So setting up tours, again, if I haven't said it enough, it's a lot of work these days, but you'll get good at it. And then just go out and crush it, and practice as a new agent, and practice showing properties, practice opening lock boxes, practice walking around the house with people. Go show your partner, your parents, or your friend a house. It's important to kind of get the reps in and get that muscle memory, because you want to be focused on building rapport and developing that relationship with the client as you're touring a property. And if you're stressed out about fumbling with other things, you're not going to be able to do as good of a job as you can do with building that rapport. Like, the first time I drove clients around, like, I was so nervous. Like, I ran a stop sign one time because I was like so focused on like not getting lost and talking to the client and all that. Like, I straight up blew a stop sign, and that's an extreme example of, some of the silly things mistakes you can make when you've got a lot of things going on. So just practice the being out there and showing properties. So when you're doing it for real, you can just be a little bit, the nerves aren't as strong, and you can be a little bit more relaxed and be yourself, and focus more on actually showing the property and getting feedback from your client and developing that relationship. So we talked a lot about home shopping. For the rest of the time here, we're going to talk about writing an offer. So you set up some tours, you found some properties. Sometimes, and clients will always ask, like, how many does it take? And really, it's like there's no answer to how many properties you can look at before you're ready to write an offer. Like, I've sold houses to sold the first house clients have seen, and I've had clients that have to look at 5 every weekend or 10 every week for weeks and weeks before they write their first offer. So there's things you can do as an agent to make that process more efficient, but it just comes with experience, really being able to narrow down and hone in on what they want, and then get to the point where you're writing offers. But sometimes with some clients, it's just really going to take a lot of kind of exploration and discovery and looking at lots of homes to get to that point of writing an offer. And the last thing on showing homes is have a script for what you're going to tell the clients when they are interested, and kind of what the next steps are, because you're going to get asked so often in this business, like, okay, what's this one going to go for? Or like they just assume that you're going to know what a property is going to sell for, and what it's going to take to write a winning offer. And if it was that easy and you could just know what a property was going to sell for, like, you'd get a lot more offers accepted. But the fact of the matter is it's a competitive market, and it's very fluid. So when clients ask you that, I always tell them, like, well, I don't want to, if you know the area well enough to confidently put a range on it, then do that. Like, typically, 4-bedroom, 2-bath this size in this neighborhood will sell for somewhere between 1.1 and 1.3, sometimes higher, sometimes less. But I'll go home after this and I'll dig into the comps, and I'll get as much detail as I can on recent activity, because that's going to give us the best idea and paint the best picture of what this property might go for. And then as we get closer to the offer deadline, I'll talk to the listing agent and see what the competition is going to be like, and see what it might take. So, you're not just telling him you don't know, but the fact of the matter is you don't really know, and you have to gather some more information and find out what it's going to possibly take to write a winning offer. But just be prepared for that question, because clients are going to ask you all the time, like, what do you think this is going to go for? And you want to be able to answer that professionally and confidently. Right, Elias or Donna or Jonathan, people expect you to know what's going to sell for all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Total nuggets. Yeah, they think we're mind readers at times.
Yeah,
We're psychic. We're supposed to be psychic for them all. So
yeah,
but we have to be
have a good answer to that question, where you can answer it professionally and thoughtfully, and set them up for the next steps in the process. My slides are out of order here, or I accidentally deleted the slide on. Oh no, here. Okay, okay. So I broke this down. So in the roadmap, it talks about the escrow, and the title here is wrong. This is writing an offer. So you get that question. Okay, we like this one. We want to write an offer. What's next? If you did a buyer's consultation, or just throughout the conversations, they should have kind of some idea of what the process is like. But it's not until they're really ready to write an offer that they're going to start wrapping their head around what it's going to take. So the first step, obviously, and the biggest thing, is just deciding on price. You're going to do that based on, they're going to lean on you a lot at that point, or good clients will really kind of lean on you a lot at that point for advice. And, using the data and relying on facts is the best place to start, because you could be a complete expert, but there's no way to know what something's really going to sell for, because the market is just, it's not as black and white as there's no formula or an equation. So I wrote in here, give the client as much data as possible for them to make an informed decision, but make sure they realize what ultimately matters is what someone else is willing to pay. And that's how values and the prices in this market just have risen so much in the last few years, is because of the lack of inventory and the competition. Like the comps in this neighborhood might show that, you know, a 1,000 square foot 2-bedroom shouldn't go for more than 750. But if it's a neighborhood that is becoming more and more desirable, and there's not a lot out there, and the neighborhood before you could get a 2-bedroom 1-bath in that price range is way more expensive, than, you know, this special, really nice, really prepared one might blow the comps out of the water. So, you know, tell them that you're going to start with the comps, but really just get them to wrap their heads around what it's worth to them, because ultimately that's what should dictate what the offer price is. And different clients will have different approaches to this. Some will be very methodical and you know, will want to base it purely on comps and what they think the value is. And they'll say, like, try to do this whole equation, and, you know, this needs a kitchen, and this is these things, and this one had a kitchen, and that's, you know, so I want to pay this for that. And, you know, you're going to have to work on coaching clients to coming up with competitive offer prices, because again, like, everybody has a different approach, and what all that matters is what someone else is willing to pay. So getting good at coaching clients to write offers or prices that they're feel good about, but and are confident in, is definitely a skill that takes some practice. So I put in here also, coaching your clients to understand what it might take to submit a competitive offer starts well before you write your first offer. So as part of, you know, based on what the client tells you they're looking for, you should be able to give them a pretty, you know, a relatively decent idea of what the competition is going to be like for what they find. Like, obviously, ideal scenario is they find a house that sits on the market, you know, maybe doesn't have an offer date and just takes offers as they come, and you can write offer at list price and they take it. But I mean, these days that doesn't happen very often. So you want to prepare them for, you know, competitive situations. And the earlier you kind of start having them wrap their heads around that, the easier it's going to make your life. Like, someone can understand you can talk to someone over and over about how competitive the market is and how stuff's selling for way over asking, but they're still going to want to see, you know, hot homes that are listed at 750 when they're, or 749 when their max budget is all in is 750. And some people just have to learn the hard way. And, you know, you obviously want to facilitate what your clients want. And if it takes looking at homes that are at their max price and maybe writing an offer that has no chance in the beginning, like, you're just going to have to go through the motions with some people. But, you know, the more confidence you have in coaching them on what the market's like, again, the easier it's going to make your life when it comes to, you know, how long this process is going to take. So on price, everybody has different ways they're going to talk to a client about it. You know, ultimately you want to, they'll lean on you and you can really advise them, but the decision at the end of the day has to be their own on what they're willing to pay. Sometimes you need to nudge your clients up. Sometimes your clients will throw wild numbers at you that, you know, maybe they don't need to be so aggressive, but you give them all the information they can and then coach them through it. And what I like to do, and again, we're really kind of talking about multiple offer situations now, because that's what requires a lot more skill to navigate a home that's been on the market for 18 days with no offers. And we can talk about those situations, but that's completely different. You know, communication with a listing agent on those, it can give you a good idea of, you know, what it might take, and it's a lot more straightforward. But what's going to be more common for you for hopefully a while, as the market stays hot, is multiple offer situations. So we're going to talk about additional terms, but the price is always the big one that you need to come to with the client. So you've given them the comps, they think they have an offer price in mind, and you know, they're ready to move forward. You just want to take a second to really make sure that they're confident in their offer price, and that if you feel like their first number is great and it gives you a shot, then great. But if you feel like, you know, there's going to be a bunch of other offers and they're not going to have a shot at what they're thinking, you need to talk through them with it a little bit more. Sometimes you're just going up to their max, you know, their max is 850, the property is 750, you think it's going to go for somewhere in the eights and they want to go 850, like that's it. And that's the conversation there. And this is something that when you get in these situations, like call me, call Elias, like call Karina, rely on your leadership team to how to coach your clients through this, because it's definitely an art. And, when you're doing it early on, it can be pretty nerve wracking. But an exercise that I like to take my clients through is kind of having them visualize, like, okay, they've set an offer price. They have some room to go higher, but obviously nobody wants to overpay. So they're going to offer, their max is 900. The property's listed at 775 and they feel good about writing 850. I like to have them go through and say, okay, we're going to write 850. If you find out later that the property ended up selling for 860, would you be bummed and wish you offered 860? And they'll think about it. And if the answer to that question is yes, then they should seriously consider writing 860. And you can incrementally do that until they get to a point where, like, okay, if somebody wants to pay $895 for that, let them, like, it's not worth $895 to me. And that way you've gotten them to really think through their offer price and put themselves in the position of potentially not getting it and how they might feel. Because the worst is when somebody, leaves some money on the table and doesn't get it, and then is kicking themselves because they wish they offered the extra 20 grand because they really wanted that house. Because it's, obviously it's up to them, but it's your job as an agent, again, to nudge them towards what might be competitive, because ultimately your job is to get them a house that they're going to be happy with. And if there's a property that is clearly going to be the right house for them, and it might just take a little bit more to get, you need to at least nudge them towards paying more. So if they don't get it, they've at least explored that possibility, like, in their mind, and they don't come back and say, like, well, why didn't you tell me to offer more? Like, that's something you never want to hear from a buyer that didn't get a house, because you want to have that conversation. And you can explain that you're doing it from a place of, like, just making sure that they think the whole thing through, because I could see how you don't want to sound pushy and like you're trying to get them to offer more because you just want to get a deal to get accepted and get your check. Like, if you've established yourself as a professional that really cares about what's best for them, you should be able to have that conversation about offering more without them thinking that you're just trying to get them to pay more so you can get a deal. So that's something that you need to get confident in. Once you've decided on offer price, the other big component of the offer terms are the contingencies. We're going to get into more detail as far as the contingencies and how they work when we get to the contracts and forms starting next week. But basically, I think at this point, you should all have some general idea of how the contingencies work and what purpose they serve. We've talked about it when we've talked about buyer's presentation. It's something that's super, super, super important for you to understand, because that's how you protect your buyers and you protect their deposit. So if you're not clear at all on how contingencies work and you're writing an offer, I mean, make sure you again, like, really go through it in detail with leadership team, because, at this point, when you're putting pen to paper, computer to DocuSign, like, you're putting the buyer's money on the table, and you need to be thoroughly confident in the forms you're filling out. So we're going to go through that stuff as part of the forms. We're going to spend a lot of time on the RPA, which is the document that you fill out, residential purchase agreement, the document you fill out that the offer essentially consists of, that lays out all the terms. But going back to writing an offer, once you've had price, you want to do the offer terms and the additional terms, and the contingencies are the biggest part of that. So the contingencies are the timeline in the contract where the buyer has the ability to back out of the transaction at essentially no penalty. So the shorter the better, because the seller is going to take their home off the market, and they're going to want to know that, if they're going to take it off the market and they're going to decline these other offers, they want to be confident that it's going to be a done deal. So the shorter the contingencies are, the better. And, I'm sure you've heard about how aggressive this market is and how people are waiving contingencies and all that. And, for better or worse, it's just the nature of this competitive market that buyers do sometimes need to waive contingencies and give up that protection in order to be competitive. It's just crucial that if they're going to do that, they understand exactly the risk. So again, like, this is something that, you find yourselves in these conversations, make sure you're talking to leadership about exactly the advice you're giving, because waiving contingencies is not something that should be done lightly. So there's three contingencies, main contingencies: the loan and appraisal, and then inspection. And deciding the length of those is part of determining the terms of the offer. The other timeline or time period that goes in the offer is the length of the escrow. Again, they want the deal to be done as soon as possible. Even if the seller is going to rent the property back and be there for 30 days, typically they're still going to want to close it as soon as possible, because they want to make sure that, again, they're taking the home off the market, it's a done deal. So as short of the escrow as possible is typically the most favorable, and as short contingencies as possible is typically the most favorable. This goes back to the importance of the lender in the transaction, because the length of the escrow and the length of the loan and appraisal contingencies are going to be essentially determined by the lender. So, when I meet a buyer, and I always do what I can to try to steer them towards, my preferred lenders, because it makes everyone's life a lot easier, and I explain the benefits of that. But you end up with whatever lender you end up with. It's good to have the conversation with them in the beginning, like, okay, like when we're writing an offer, how long do you need for an escrow? How long do you need for contingencies? And you want to ask that question in the beginning if they already have a lender, because if that lender tells you, we need at least 30 days for escrow and we'd like 14 days for contingencies, like that's on the longer side, and that could put you at a competitive disadvantage down the road. So if their lender's telling you that, then that's a good opportunity to advise the buyer, like, hey, I talked to your lender, he seems like a nice guy or girl, but they're a big bank and they move a little slower, and when we write an offer, we're going to be writing a 30-day close with 14-day contingencies, and we're going to be up against offers that have much shorter timelines. And sometimes, even if we're a little bit higher, a seller is willing to go with an offer that's a little bit less, because they want to be sure that it's a done deal, and longer timelines just make people nervous. So again, can't hammer in importance enough of having a lender that executes at a high level, communicates at a high level, and performs and can do so in a competitive market. So length of escrow, loan and appraisal determined by the lender, basically. And I always tell the lender, like, I want to be as aggressive as possible, but I also want to make sure that, like, you can actually do what you say you're going to do. And if you have that conversation with them up front, then if, they said they can do 10 days or 7 days and you're on a couple days before they're due, you can remind them, like, hey, like, we got to remove these on time. You said you could do it in this amount of time. So it's an important conversation to have. And then there's the inspection contingency, which is kind of the most important one of all, because it's the contingency that allows the buyer to back out for essentially almost any reason. They could decide that there was too much traffic, or their parents didn't like the house, whatever. It's not like you need something in an inspection report to bail on a property because of using the inspection contingency. So the buyer understanding that contingency and what it actually does for them is super important, because that's going to be their safety net. So that's really going to vary, and these are things that when you're writing your first few offers, that you can go to myself or anyone on the leadership team and for advice on, because it's really going to depend on the situation. If there's no reports at all, or minimal disclosures, like, chances are nobody's being super aggressive on inspection contingencies, almost certainly not waiving any contingencies. And also, listing agent is probably expecting inspection contingencies. If there's a home, roof, termite, pest, sewer report, sidewalks already done, if you're in Oakland, if it's a super thorough disclosure package, like, they're doing that because they want to minimize any future negotiations, but they're also doing that because they're hoping that by providing all the information up front, they get a buyer that's going to waive contingencies. So the inspection contingency is, the length of it's really going to vary depending on how much information you have. But generally speaking, you talk to your buyer about what additional inspections and what additional information and investigation they want to do in that time period, and you make the inspection contingency as short as possible, so you can get all that done in the quickest amount of time, so you can write a short inspection contingency. So these are the things that we'll coach you on when you're writing your first offers. But just general understanding of what dictates the length of those contingencies. those are the basic terms. They're the offer price, the length of the escrow, the length of the contingencies. There are some other kind of secondary terms. The size of the deposit is one. What's standard is 3% of the purchase price. 3% is considered a strong deposit because if things were to go completely sideways and the buyer's deposit was somehow to be at risk, then 3% is the max the seller could keep as damages. We'll go into this in more detail because it's important you understand it. But the main takeaway right now is that you want to advise your buyers as a 3% deposit, and that's going to be due in 3 business days of a contract being accepted. So make sure that they understand that they need to have some cash ready to go if the offer is accepted, and that 3% is customary. Because if you write $1,000 deposit on an $800,000 house, like you could go down the road and then 5 days before close they could decide that they want to bail out, and if the only penalty is losing that $1,000, like they might do it. And so that's why a seller won't like a really small deposit. And typically if you have a really minimal deposit in most markets, they're gonna counter that, because that puts the seller at risk of the buyer backing out even beyond the contingency period. So the size of the deposit is a secondary factor. Always shoot for 3%, roughly 3%. Explain to your clients why it's almost standard. Including pre-approval and verification of funds is part of a strong offer, but again, that's something that in this market is almost standard. So make sure you have that information up front. And then sometimes there are going to be things like the seller would like a 15 or 30-day rent back. Like that's something you can include in the offer. If they want 30 days rent back, like I always try to get my clients to provide rent backs at no cost, because it just makes your offer even better. Any little things, the listing agent will have either put in the remarks or, as part of communication with the listing agent, we'll get to in a second here. You want to find that stuff out. And the reason you make all these little terms as aggressive as possible and attractive as possible is because in a multiple offer situation, you want your offer to stand out. So if you have really good terms, but you're not the highest offer, but your offer is put together, very clean. Like Elias was saying, like all the paperwork, all the documentation, super clean. Your terms are pretty good, or the best, but your offer is the lowest. Then they might come back and counter your offer, or talk to you more about things that you can do, because you might not be the highest price, but you've established yourself as the buyer and the agent that they want to work with. So you do all these little things, and sometimes it might not matter to have 5-day contingencies or a free rent back, but you will find yourself in situations where those little things are the difference between getting a multiple counter offer or getting a counter offer just for you. Like I had one recently where we removed inspection contingency, kind of at the last minute, because I was talking to the listing agent and she said she had a couple agents had expressed that they're going to write non-contingent offers, and we were a little bit lower. We still had loan and appraisal. I had talked to the agent a few times and built a good rapport, and she called me and said, if you can remove all contingencies, we'll just counter you. If not, we'll probably do a multiple counter and see who comes up on price. So that kind of brings me to my next point when it comes to submitting offers, which is establishing a rapport with the listing agent. This is an art too, for sure. And it's, sometimes going to be easier than others. I'm in a deal right now where I've literally never talked to the listing agent on the phone. He's super old school. He gave the lender a hard time when we got the offer accepted. We barely communicate. It is what it is. We're going to get the deal done. But ideally, you have a relationship with listing agent from before you even start. And so, going back to the start of this process, as soon as a buyer wants to write an offer on a home, it's your job as an agent to make sure the listing agent knows. And maybe you don't even call and say they love the home and they can't wait to submit an offer, like we're going to be aggressive. But at the very least, the agent should know that your buyer is considering or likely going to write an offer, because you want to be kept in the loop. And that starts your relationship with the listing agent. And I always ask for permission to check in kind of right before the offer date. Sometimes they answer the phone, sometimes they don't, because if a property's super hot, everybody's calling listing agent an hour before the deadline trying to see what information they can squeeze out. So some listing agents will be super forthcoming with the information that'll be helpful. Some will just stonewall you with submit your highest and best, but that doesn't mean that you don't try every single time. And you can tell your client, like, I'm going to do whatever I can to get whatever intel will help us put together a strong offer, but you can't rely on it because you won't always get stuff. But that effort of establishing the relationship with the listing agent will help you when everything's on the table if you're really close. So going back to doing everything the same all the time, all these little things when it comes to submitting an offer can be the difference sometimes. I have my lender call. This is another best practice is I have my lender call right when I submit the offer. I always submit the offer just, as a matter of practice, kind of right before the deadline. It's just what I've always done in multiple offer situations, just in case there's those offers that, those agents that are prying for information. But realistically, like, if an agent's going to tell an agent, like, what offers they have and what it might take to beat him, like, they're going to tell them no matter what. But, you still want to kind of game it as much as possible. But I always have my lender call, and, it does a couple of things. One, it sets you, not everybody does that. Not every lender calls. And if you have a good lender that you're confident in, when they call and if they connect with a listing agent, that just is another point kind of towards your offer, because it shows that communication is important. And it's going to be, if this is someone you're to get in contact with, the communication with the lender is super important. Like, more often than not, when you find yourself in some stressful point of a transaction, it has to do with the lender. So having a lender that you can be confident in is a good thing to establish with the listing agent right away. And I also like having them call, because sometimes they'll be a little bit more forthcoming with information to the lender, or the things that they'll say to the lender are, cues for you. I had one a long time ago where it was a condo for my brother. The lender called, I had mentioned that it was for my brother. The lender mentioned it. The agent, she was a established agent. She wanted to do what she could to kind of help me out. So she told the lender, she asked the lender, like, hey, can they come up to this? Because if they can, we were going to multiple counter, but if they can come up to this price, we would just take that offer then. So the lender called me and said, hey, if you revise your offer and submit this, like, they'll accept your offer. So, obviously those are best case scenarios, and that call from the lender gets you some additional information. But at the very least, it's establishing that, you're professional and that you're somebody that agent wants to work with. So submitting the offer, putting together a clean, tight offer, communication, building rapport with the listing agent. I mean, I know we kind of jammed a ton of stuff in, and I'm sure there's stuff we missed, but, we're trying to cover a lot of ground. What questions do you have at this point about, that whole process of coaching your clients to write an offer and submitting offer? And, again, to stress that this is something that when you get to this for real, this is when you lean on your leadership team, and that's what we're here for. Karina's the deal doctor. She has a ton of experience, and she can really kind of give insight on, specific situations. It's hard to talk about all the things you can really do because it is going to be situational, but lean on the resources. Karina's the deal doctor. She works Monday through Friday 9 to 5. So if you're freaking out about an offer that you have to write on a Wednesday night at 9, call me or call Elias. But
which brings me to a good point, which is prepare ahead of time. You don't want to be doing it last minute. You can get a lot of stuff prepared before you ever, contact the client about it, like just the address, the listing agent, the tax ID number, APN, make sure that when you're writing an offer, if you're on the team, with the team model of our team, newer agents usually are, Kenny will be on your contract with you, which means I need to review that offer before it gets sent out to the clients to sign. So I just want to make sure that everything's, completely in order. You know, you may have worked with John or Elias or somebody else within the team, and that's great. But just before you send it to your clients, I want to take a peek at it, make sure there's nothing big that we need to fix before it goes out to the clients.
And even if you do work with me or Elias on it, I still want Karina to look at it regardless of when you're on the team. So if you plan ahead and you can get as many eyes on everything as possible, that helps. And Karina, I'm not used to having you these last couple of weeks, so I'm just blabbing on, but
Oh, no, you're doing great.
feel free to inject anything that you think is important. We have a little bit of time left. And I think the main thing that I want to stress is that, we have somebody on the team with a wealth of experience, and from working with Kenny all these years, she's been involved in a ton of deals, and that's where you get, you learn something new almost every transaction. So to have access to a wealth of experience is something that you should take advantage of.
Yes, please. And then just like piggybacking on that is anywhere that you sign on the contract is where Kenny's going to sign on the contract as well. So we'll go over that when we actually get to the offer writing segment on the forms, but just keep that in your mind as you're moving forward.
Awesome. I don't know where my chat window. Oh, here it is. All right. I'm just looking through questions here. Everyone, people throw out some questions. I've talked too much. Come on. Somebody. Did I explain everything so concisely that nobody has any questions about submitting an offer? Is anybody listening still?
Absolutely fantastic job. You're killing it.
Oh man.
I know that might be another time, John, but you know how like for the newer agents, like comparables, you know how we all might have our own way or version of doing comps. Like we might do comps. That's why I'm saying it might be another class.
Yeah. So actually that's a good point. And that's something that, and really like this could be an 8-hour class. Like on what we talked about today could be so much, because each little bullet point could be something that or each step of the process is something that we could go into so much more detail on. But yes, that's a good point. And that's something that we should have a lab for, because running comps is, there's some best practices, there's some guidelines, but it's something that you will need practice on, and you'll figure out the best way to do it for you. Not just like the principles that you apply in when you run them, but also like how you do it, what program you use. Like there's a bunch of different tools out there. Like I use the MLS search because that's what I've always used, and I've gotten a good system for running comps. But yes, we'll running comps. So we'll do a lab on, and if you can't make the labs, we'll make sure they're recorded, because these will be good reference to when you actually have to do it, because we'll go through, like we'll do a lab on setting up a buyer's tour, and we'll do a lab on running comps where we go through, a step-by-step scenario. Yes. and actually run comps and kind of what goes into it. And sometimes running comps is super easy because it's a neighborhood that's fairly straightforward and there's a lot of activity. And sometimes you're just like, reaching for things that'll work because there's nothing similar that's sold in, anywhere close. And then then you're really kind of making adjustments, and it's more of an art. But we'll go through that in detail, because running comps is kind of a basic, a pillar skill that you need to have in this business, because you're going to run comps when somebody is thinking about buying a home, and you're going to run in comps when someone's thinking about selling a home. So getting really good at it and being confident in the comps you run and the information you extract from those comps and how you explain it is, crucial to being successful at doing this job.
Got one question, John.
Yes, sir.
Do you run your comps before you show homes to your clients? Like, let's just say if they want to see 5 homes, do you always run comps, and before you meeting them, do you always have them in hand?
In an ideal world, yeah. Like in an ideal world, you have a really good idea. So when you get that question, you have an idea. You get that question of what do you think this sells for? You actually have some specific information. I'll often kind of run comps when I get a new buyer. I'll just run comps for, you know, the different general things that they're looking for, just so I have an idea of, you know, how realistic is this? How much activity is there in this, you know, price range and area? But as far as doing a full blown CMA for every property that you're going to show, I mean, I would say that that's probably overkill, but there's also nothing wrong with it. Like, it's good practice. So like as new agents with more time, I would say that it'd be a good exercise to full on run comps, you know, and you don't need to dump all the information on your clients, but to full on run comps for every property that you're going to show would be good practice, you know, when you're figuring this all out.
Hey, John.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so for comps, the more you really should do that as we were getting started, so you can really learn all the neighborhoods. Like, I can easily talk about Jack London because I know these buildings have this many properties, this is average days of market. It's like, it's through the process where you're constantly building up your knowledge base. And then, like, many times I'll shop with a new buyer in a certain area and I'll say, hey, I know this isn't for your property, but this is a CMA I did for another 3-bedroom house in this neighborhood about a month ago. Things haven't really changed too much yet. So then this CMA report is still applicable to you. So it's when you're doing comps, you're really studying the market, because then you have no other reason to stare at comps all day.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Is that when you have time, like, you know, until you have real stuff to work on, you have a lot of time. So just because you don't have clients to communicate with or escrows to work on or marketing, I mean, you're working on marketing anyway, but fill that time with practice. So studying the market, running comps is studying the market. So every area, every neighborhood that you think you're going to work, like, run comps for different types of properties. So, you know, when you do find clients, you are more knowledgeable. And it's just good practice in the process of running comps and analyzing the market. Like, spend the time practicing those things, because it's just going to make you sharper for when you're doing it for real. And it's just going to, you're studying, basically. You're studying to become a better agent. So dedicate some time to doing that.
Check out that link I just dropped. So Altos Research, I use it for every buyer when I talk about pricing. And I also do a printout, a single page printout for every single listing I go on. Because here, like, if you just type in any random zip code, and you scroll down to, it's also divided between houses and condos / townhomes. So this really makes you understand, become a neighborhood expert. Because interestingly enough, Walnut Creek has 44% price decreases in the last month. Okay. But if you scroll down all the way to the bottom, you can see that Altos Research breaks down the segments into the size of the property. So you can see, like, this, typically this rough size house is going to be in this range. So I can give you an example. I sell a lot of homes in West Oakland. I know that if a house in West Oakland, a typical house in West Oakland, average condition, 1,200 square feet, is going to be like 650 grand. There's very few houses that exceed that. And then if the house is like 1,600 square feet, it's probably like 850. And then you have some stuff that's 2,000 square feet, it's probably $1 million. But then every market is and every zip code is very specific on those things. And those are like 200 grand spreads with a couple hundred square feet. But there are certain neighborhoods like in Oakland where the neighborhood is really just 650 to 850. So if it's 1,500 square feet in Millsmont, which we have a ton of properties, like, it's probably like 7 and a quarter. And then if it's like 1,000 square feet, it's probably like 625. So, like, you got to really understand, like, the breakdown and the tiers of pricing between different neighborhoods. And when it's a combination of running comps, looking at values. And then when you're looking at comps too, you just want to go really wide and then start breaking down the data to what you want, the story you want to tell. So when I tell people when you're doing a CMA, you want to do this is storytelling. I've seen very senior agents do terrible CMAs. I don't understand how they're still in business, and I've actually worked with many of them before. But why is it terrible? Because their CMA would have comps from 400 grand to 1.1. So put yourself in your buyer's shoe. Like, what is it that you're trying to say? Should I write 1.1 or should I write 400 grand on this property? So because if you're not good at running comps and telling a story, your client is going to be like, well, there's this sale, I want to write like that one. And then you have to explain to them why that's not a good comp. Well, why did you even include it in the report in the first place?
Yeah, that's a great point. A CMA should tell a story. I always say, like, the comps paint the picture of what the market's doing. And yeah, a good CMA should illustrate
fairly narrow in, like, what it is that you're
specific
trying
to that property. If you're looking for, if you're looking at a 3-1 in Millsmont, the comps should really just paint the picture of what the market's been like for 3-1 on 3-1s in Millsmont. And it's also too, like, certain neighborhoods, trends are going to be more important because there's neighborhoods that are, becoming more desirable and are rising in value quicker than other neighborhoods where the values are a lot more stable. And, properties, what it would sell for now versus 6 months or a year ago is the same. And there's some where, depending on where that neighborhood's at and kind of the evolution of the market, like a year could be a huge difference, or 6 months even.
To add nuggets to that, sorry, earlier my speaker was on, my microphone was on. I'm sorry to break into that earlier.
Oh, no worries.
I wanted to know, do you guys use RPR? RPR, I like when Kenny addressed that, they can go in there and break in the criterias where you can see like for like, right? So you can add in the pieces there saying that if the property is comparable to it, add it to on there, and then they break out a CMA for you, that the price is really, really accurate on there. I don't know. I know a lot of seasoned agents that use the RPR for a listing evaluation pricing. Do you use that, Kenny, or which one do you use?
I don't. But I highly do recommend it. My preference is Cloud CMA because of the way it looks. I like things that just look better, but RPR is more detailed with numbers and stuff. I think it's really important for agents to have the RPR app on their phone, so you can actually do a really quick and dirty CMA that's fairly accurate. It's an official product from National Association of Realtors. So like, I don't depend on some of these tools just because I've literally done thousands of CMAs. So as you're learning, and I'm not really working outside areas I don't know that well until this year, so I would say use that on a few for on the fly CMA. But this is kind of why we're also like, we want agents to learn more markets, but you should know, at least know one market really well. It's really hard to be a generalist. This year, we're definitely reaching a lot more regionally, but you should at least have a couple of areas and airports you know really well. So when you speak about that, it's a lot easier to convert a client.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and that's a good point, that there are tools out there that are going to make these things a little easier, and they're going to be pretty good. Like the RPR, Cloud CMA, you can fetch listings automatically based on criteria or whatever. There's ways to do kind of quick and dirty comps, but that's no matter how good the algorithms and the criteria and the searches are, that's not a substitute for the skill that you need to build of being able to go in and dig through the comps and put together that story or paint that picture, just using, your understanding of the market and the market dynamics. Like if you just automatically are running comps by, clicking a couple buttons, it's a crutch. I think that's going to really, you're going to miss a piece of how to understand the market if you're just using the, it's like if they had a bike that could automatically balance itself and then you just rode that without ever learning how to balance a bike, like that's what some of those tools are. They get the job done and they do a pretty good job, but you skip the learning experience and the knowledge that comes with doing it from scratch.
I'll give you a really good example. That's actually happened today or yesterday. Yesterday, I went to show a house in Pleasanton, asking $1.395, so $1.4 million. And then I told the seller, in a hot market like this, typically good agents are pricing about 10% of their asking. For me, the couple hundred listings I sold, my average price is about 11%. So I was telling him about a preemptive offer. So I'd be very careful about the words you use. So I was like, hey, let me check on this. I haven't looked at the comps yet, but typically if you want a preemptive offer to get accepted, it has to be pretty compelling and strong. So I need to confirm this, but you might have to write up to like 1.55 to 1.6 if this is a pricing strategy. Then I went online. So this guy, he's actually I think he's like the top 3 agents in Pleasanton. His name is Douglas Buons over at Compass. I saw that he actually has like 20 listings right now. He has sold 17 listings closed in the last 3 months. I looked at his pricing strategy. His over asking list price is like 101% or 100%. So he's pretty much pricing transparently on his listings. So good thing I say myself through experience, like, hey, this is what I think could happen, but let me check. So then I check and I immediately send the client, hey, you know what? I checked this as the agents, how they pricing it. I think we'd probably win this property at 1.4 million. But like, at least I set the tone that, hey, maybe you have the right to decide. But I how bad it would be if I told them you might have to write 1.6, and they people do this all the time. They check with another agent that knows the area better. It's like, no, this is 1.4, and then they call me and it's like, hey, I had another agent check is 1.4. Why do I want to write at 1.6? So I have to be very careful with my words. I hate let me check on this. But because I use the right words to prepare tonight, we have a Zoom call with them to write an offer up. I think we're going to write at the list price, but we'll very, very likely get the property because the listing agent has sold all other properties for list price. But this is what the power of like researching the market's like, what the agents do, how many offers and stuff like that. So every market is different. Like this is something I just learned about Pleasanton.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's an awesome story because there's a lot of like, that illustrates a lot of super important points. But I think the biggest thing of that is just, and something that I probably should have hammered on along the way is like, you got to be really careful with what you say, especially if you're not sure. Like you can never, you don't, I would rather risk not having an answer and having a good way of explaining that you'll go get the information and follow up with them than answer a question that I have no business answering or just throw out a guess. And if, you know, that's yeah, that's not to mean that you can't like speculate or put a range or just get, you know, this is what I think on this now, but if you're not 100% confident, and even when you're, you know, even when you are 95% confident, you got to have the caveat a lot of the times that like you're going to get more information and you're going to confirm what you think, or it could be different. Like then that way, if you're wrong and they weren't expecting you to be totally right anyway, because you told them you didn't have all the information you needed to answer that question. And, you know, you got to be careful with what you say. And I would almost always like, this doesn't apply to everything, but you want to under promise and over deliver. And if you're just throwing out super confident answers to questions you shouldn't necessarily be answering without all the information, it can put you in a bad spot.
They always say rely on your experts, you know, like to reflect the home inspector, your lender, your mentor, whatever it may be, to get that answer properly taken care of, rather than, like John said, just
Totally.
and
You'll get really good at answering questions without actually answering them. You'll get really good at like, you'll have a script for like answering a question where really all you're answering is, I don't know, I'll find out. But that's not what you're saying. But that's exactly what you're going to do. And when Karina's talking about relying on experts, that brings up the point of having experts for everything, to where when somebody has a question, like, you know, and this is something that I think we'll do a class on, but just to use 1031 as exchange for an example, like you should know what a 1031 exchange is, generally speaking. But when someone has specific questions, like you're not going to answer those. You're going to defer to the expert. Or, you know, you should know like some basic thing about roofs, but like you're not going to go into detail. You're going to ask an inspector or roof inspector. So you'll get really good at answering questions where really all you're saying is, I don't know, let me find out, but in a very, you know, professional way that still comes off as a confident answer and, you know, provides value to the person asking.
So a really competent and strong agent doesn't have all the answers, nor should they be giving that much guidance on stuff, but they know where to get all the answers. So yeah. Like if you ask me about like a lawyer, I can need 5 lawyers. You ask me about painting, I can talk about this sidewalk. Okay, here's 5 recommendations. You're constantly, or you have maybe I'll share that. Like I have a bookmark manager of tons of links and resources. This is where you're building up your kind of database, and this is also how we're kind of building up Slack. So anything that we have that's good, useful, like if a client had a quick answer for you, maybe quick question, maybe check on Slack while you're there. Maybe the answer's in there somewhere too.
Yeah, you'll get really good at finding answers to questions. And just, you know, if you say you're going to follow up on something, just remember to actually follow up. All right, we're a little bit past noon. I know we crammed a lot in there, and this is really kind of the some writing offers and showing properties is like a significant part of this job. So to cruise over that in, you know, an hour and a half is not doing it justice, but we'll have a lot more stuff coming your way, and doing the labs where we're getting into more detail with the CMAs and the buyer tours and everything. But hopefully this is a good start for agents that are newer and haven't really gotten a chance to do this stuff for real yet. And, you know, for the people that have written a couple offers or have a couple deals under your belt, hopefully I added some, you know, perspective or just some information that helps you think about the way that you're doing things. So that's it for this week. Next week we start diving into contracts and forms. So we're really gonna focus on the RPA and the documents that go along with it. And after we're talking about submitting offers and strategizing, next week we're going to talk about actually where do we put numbers and what does this box mean and what is this actually like? What happens? What does it mean if I check this box and how do I explain these paragraphs? So getting comfortable with
You mean Thursday the 5th?
Thursday the 5th, yes. On Thursday, yeah, next class, Mondays and Thursdays, 10:30. We're working with forms for the next couple of weeks, so be ready for that. That's one where you're going to want to kind of follow along and take notes, because we're going to go through the document, and when you're doing it for real, this is a class where you can get some answers to questions that might pop up when you're filling it out for a client. So thanks everybody for your time. Have a great Monday.
Thanks,
Thank
John.
you.
Thank you, John.
Cool.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John. Awesome session, man.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Good job, JG.
All right, I'm pretty sure I recorded it this time too. All right, I did, yes. Thanks for coming, Jonathan.
Sure, you too. All right, JG.